Harry's Wife, Part 91.3, BBC Podcast Blast. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We turn to the super soaraway sun. It's getting pretty sparky today, isn't it? Popping up repeatedly. And an article written by Liam Coleman tells us, disrespectful. BBC quietly shelve controversial podcast about Harry's wife and Harry after TV series receives over 900 complaints. The article explains that the BBC has shelved a controversial podcast about Harry's wife and Harry after an accompanying TV series received more than 900 complaints. The Harry's Wife and the Media podcast was meant to follow on from the Princes and the Press documentary. But after viewers complained that the documentary was disrespectful to the royal family, the Beeb quietly dropped the podcast. The two-part BBC Two documentary presented by Amal Rajan aired allegations that William's staff had briefed against the Sussexes. It was slammed by the royal households for unfounded claims. The podcast was set to include far more controversial material. It will apparently now be released on an unconfirmed date. Now, with regard to this podcast, where it contains more controversial material, one suspects that it contains controversial material not with regard to portraying Harry and Harry's wife in a bad light, but rather continuing to be disrespectful to the royal family. Otherwise, why would the Beeb have reacted? They've responded to complaints about the Princes in the Press documentary, because people complained that that was viewed as being disrespectful to the royal family, and therefore one can only conclude that the Harry's Wife and the Media podcast would be similarly disrespectful towards the royal family, and the BBC doesn't want to risk an angry mob marching on Broadcasting House with torches and pitchforks yelling, "Burn them! Burn them! Burn the lefty-leaning wokists." And so it has been dropped, at least for the time being. What's the effect of that? Well, of course, we have no idea, or certainly I haven't, what the material was within that podcast, other than that it was likely to be sending further zingers towards the royal family, which of course would be the assertion of control by proxy, and doubtless would be looking to portray them in a favourable light. And consequently its dropping, where it was deemed to be favourable to them, would amount to wounding to Harry's wife. There was something that was going to be done on her behalf which would extend her agenda, which would allow her to assert control, which would allow her to draw fuel, character traits and residual benefits, and because it's no longer being aired, that would amount to her being wounded, assuming, of course, that she's aware that it isn't going to be aired. If she has no knowledge of that, then there is no impact upon her. But the failure to do something for a narcissist, and the narcissist being aware of that, it amounts to wounding. We receive no fuel, and it threatens our sense of control. And as I've explained to you elsewhere, wounding is the worst thing that you can ever do to the narcissist. You have three interactions with us. You have the provision of pure fuel, be it positive or negative. When you do that, there isn't a problem. You're giving us fuel, and you're signalling that you're under control. Then there is challenge fuel. This is where you continue to give us fuel, so there isn't a problem, but your behaviour, your words, etc. are challenging. So, for instance, angrily yelling at us, "Where the hell have you been? You were meant to be here 2 hours ago," provides us with fuel because of your emotional reaction, but the questioning of us, the attempt to hold us to some form of accountability, is a challenge, and we therefore have to deal with that. Then thirdly, there is wounding. The absence of fuel and a threat to control, and this is done by you failing to do something. Failing to answer your phone, failing to respond to a text message, ignoring us, crossing the road when we see you. not doing something for us that we anticipated that you ought to do. And of course, in some instances, you never intended to do it, and it's the narcissist's delusion that believes that you were going to do something which results in the failure occurring. If you want to understand more about those interactions, you could do no better than to go to the Knowledge Vault and obtain the 3 interactions with the narcissist. Link to the Knowledge Vault in the video description below. And therefore, if Harry's wife is unaware of the pulling of this podcast, it doesn't impact upon her. However, if it comes to her attention, it will wound, and therefore it will necessitate a response from her, quite possibly smearing the royal family to say, look, they've intervened again and they've got this pulled. See how they try and stop us, Harry, achieving our aims. See how they're always trying to make life difficult for us. A mixture of pity play and provocative smearing. Alternatively, it may well be the case that she would complain to relevant members of the coterie about what's happened in terms of the fact that the podcast has been pulled, something that, of course, was going to be favourable. What it does demonstrate, however, is that certainly the BBC are not held in sway to them, and whilst they aired the controversial Princes and the Press, the fact that they are mindful of causing further controversy with regard to the royal family shows that they are not firmly ensconced in the camp of Harry and Harry's wife, otherwise they would have proceeded with it. And the Beeb is taking a more measured approach to this, and the blast caused by them failing to air the podcast may well wound Harry's wife. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.